Over 70% of gold in the world comes from places like this. Poor, developing countries. 70%. Canadian mining companies are making a killing in Honduras, one of the poorest in the Western Hemisphere. People here say all they leave behind is toxic waste, sickness, and death. That's why when they look at this, it looks awfully dirty. This ring is a gold ring made in Canada. There are lots of Canadian mining companies here taking the gold out of your country and turning it into rings like this. What does that gold ring mean to you?
I would say this is a ring of hunger, it's a ring of suffering, it's a ring of pain of many Hondurans and Central Americans.
Dejarnos con problemas de piel, caída de cabello, con problemas estomagales de vista, bronquiales, eso significa ese anillo. Destrucción de la vida.
This is part of an industry. It's an industry that is legitimate, that is giving a lot of comfort, I would say, to the people who wear these jewels, but it's fair also to share.
For an ounce of gold, you have to remove and process and contaminate with cyanide, and leach out heavy metals from 10 tons of earth and mountains and rock.
Para beneficio de sus habitantes, de sus pobladores. Sí, lamentablemente esto no está sucediendo con la explotación minera a cielo abierto en Honduras.
But Canadian mining companies don't see any dirt.
It's through the gold and the gold mining that we were able to provide a facility such as this in a town that probably wouldn't be where it is right now economically.
Luis Santos isn't buying it. This Roman Catholic bishop thinks gold miners are nothing but gold diggers. He wants them out of Honduras now.
Riegan el agua cianurada con mariposa. Eso va en el aire y las casas de la aldea están abajo.
Then miners try to win him over.
Si usted quiere, lo invitamos a que dé una vuelta y sin ningún problema. Que así como se dicen tantas cosas que son mentiras, queremos que se sepa la verdad, pues.
Bishop Santos says truth could never come from a gold miner. To him, they're just as corrupt as his government.
De aquí llevan esto regalado y en Canadá se vende caro. Y esto es porque los diputados del Congreso Nacional regalan la madera y regalan el oro y la plata de Honduras a cambio de recibir ellos un dinero de las compañías transnacionales.
He's spoken out a lot against gold mining. He doesn't care what it costs him.
Me dijeron que algunos empresarios en Tegucigalpa hablaban de matarme. Y acá en Santa Rosa de Copán, que lo más probable era que me mandaran a matar. Pero yo pienso que cuando uno ama su tierra, su país, la vida es un valor secundario. Lo que importa es la fe en Cristo Jesús y la defensa de los pobres.
Defending the poor from an industry he believes will bring more poverty. His diocese in Copan is one of the poorest in Honduras, even though it's home to a Canadian gold mine.
Abajo, donde se mira la destrucción, era la aldea de San Andrés. La mina se llama de San Andrés. Entonces la compañía minera quitó todas las casas, hizo en otro lugar casas nuevas para la gente y ellos empezaron a explotar el cerro con el método de cielos abiertos.
We asked Bishop Santos to show us the hardship the mine is causing.
Y aquí hay un señor que le quitaron sus manzanas de tierra, la hija se quejó el año pasado conmigo, no pudimos hacer nada.
For a country so rich in silver and gold, poverty just doesn't add up in Honduras. The Spanish came first, then North Americans took over. In 1880, they used donkeys to carry the silver and gold away. This mine in San Juancito is on the back of the country's money. But Bishop Santos says most Hondurans will never profit from gold mining.
Los pueblos mineros son los pueblos más pobres. Y Honduras ha sido un pueblo minero desde 1600 en tiempos de los españoles, en la colonia española. Y hemos sido siempre minas, y somos el pueblo más pobre.
The Rosario Mining Company left the country in 1954. At the time, the mine was so important, the American consulate was here. Pedro Landa works for the Catholic Development Agency, Caritas. So what happened to this town when the mine left?
Bueno, los impactos fueron grandes. En primer lugar, toda la población que dependía de la mina quedó totalmente desempleada. El pueblo entró en una depresión económica, en una crisis económica grande.
Landa worries when the Canadian mines leave, there'll be another economic crisis. That's the last thing Honduras needs. It still hasn't recovered from Hurricane Mitch in 1998. Massive flooding and mudslides left the country in ruins. 30,000 died or disappeared. Most of the country's crops gone. Nearly all bridges and secondary roads destroyed. Over 1 million homeless. Weeks later, a desperate government turned again to mining. This time, they hoped it could help rebuild the economy. They passed a new law giving foreign companies free access to land, free use of water, and huge tax breaks.
This is an area for the, we can oversee a couple of things. One is the waste dump.
It was an offer Canadian mining companies couldn't refuse. Bill Dodge manages the San Martin mine, owned by Canada's Goldcorp. They're the second biggest gold company in the world. They have the largest open pit mine in Honduras.
We were probably the first mine that opened up after that mining regulation, so I think it was, I think that regulation was to bring companies like our company into the country and move ahead, so I think it was probably a good thing.
Open pit mines use fairly new and potentially dangerous technology. It's the cheapest way to mine, but uses a lot of water. Rock containing gold particles is dug out of mountains and spread on top of a waterproof liner. The rock is soaked with a mixture of water and highly toxic cyanide. The solution leaches out gold and other heavy metals like arsenic. It drains into collecting ponds and then the gold is extracted. Goldcorp's been at it since 2001. That's when people in the Sierra Valley said they'd been lied to. Despite the mine's promises, their wells dried up and some got sick. Their cries made it all the way to the head of Honduras's Catholic Church. Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez was shocked by what he saw.
Por la simple propaganda vacía, por los que haciendo promesas después no las cumplen, sino ya dice el Evangelio, por sus frutos los conocerán. No queremos que estos bosques nuestros y estas montañas generosas que son fuentes de agua se conviertan después en ruinas.
Contamination is exactly what happened at the San Andreas mine. 300 gallons of toxic cyanide solution were dumped into a nearby river in January 2003. It killed 18,000 fish. The mine was fined over $50,000.
Donde están los hombres, aquí está la tubería. La tubería pasa debajo de la carretera y viene acá. Aquí está. Ahí está el tubo y va al río. Hizo una tapada.
When we asked Bishop Santos to meet the people here, they wouldn't talk.
Tienen miedo por las represalias. Es que como hay parientes trabajando y recibiendo el sueldo de la mina y buen sueldo, entonces la gente no habla.
Everyone felt intimidated as miners watched our every move. Bishop Luis Santos says people are afraid in Honduras, scared to complain about the damage done by gold mining. But Pedro Landa agreed to show us what's happening around Goldcorp's mine.
Bueno, en estos momentos se ha convertido en una calle, pero originalmente esto es un riachuelo para la comunidad donde se abastecían para agua, para sus necesidades básicas. Un estudio que hizo el Ministerio Público en el año 2001 reveló que a 2 años de haberse iniciado las operaciones mineras se habían secado 14 riachuelos y pozos en la comunidad.
Y no solo una bomba del pozo que no está funcionando, a nosotros...
Members of the local water board say they spent a fortune maintaining and repairing wells, but this one isn't working. They shut it down. The water output was so low, it's not worth the electricity to run it. And this used to be a field of tomatoes.
El problema es que no tenemos agua. Agua a lo suficiente para regar. El tomate ocupa agua bastante. Por el problema de la mina, que mucha agua se fue.
But Goldcorp says the water shortage isn't their fault. Tim Miller is the VP for Central America.
There was a drought in 2001 and 2002 and going into 2003, and everybody in this region had a very tough time, especially the farmers. Rainfall was about 50% of normal for those 2 years, and it was a very tough time.
And as for why the rivers are dry now,
the rest of the streams around here dry up annually during the dry season, which is right now. Right now we're in the middle of the dry season.
But Marco Artiega says that's a lie. He's lived here his whole life. It's never been this dry.
Esta quebrada pues anteriormente no se secaba, pero resulta que ahora, después de que han empezado las operaciones, esta quebrada ya no tiene agua en tiempo de sequía.
Goldcorp insists they're not taking water from rivers. They have another source.
Rain. This would be rain and recycle of the water that we use. So the majority of our water that we use here comes from the rainwater that falls on the pads.
Now they say they face the opposite problem of their neighbors. They have too much water. That's because the massive liner underneath the rock collects water every time it rains.
We're really actually trying to evaporate the water because we have more water than we need, and that's because of the rains. So we just got through the rainy season in December. December was the wettest December that we've had since we've been here, and that has given us a surplus of water.
But nearby villages simply don't have the technology to collect rainwater. They depend on wells. And Goldcorp gives them some of their surplus. This tanker provides water for washing. They also have several stations where anyone can fill up. But the water isn't safe to drink. Artiega thinks all the water here is contaminated. That's why he buys what he drinks.
¿Me puede vender un agua, por favor?
Fear of contamination has paid off for some. Water sales are booming.
Una.
Antes vendía menos, ahora se vende más.
¿Vende más? ¿Y por qué?
No sé, la gente toma, posible por miedo a la contaminación que dicen que hay.
Contamination scared the people who used this well. Goldcorp drilled it for them. Then Rodolfo Artiega says the mine closed it down.
Estuvimos consumiendo agua con arsénico y otros metales pesados. y debido a eso hubieron efectos negativos.
Goldcorp admits their well was contaminated, but they say the arsenic occurs in the water naturally.
We thought we would hit a good water source that they could use, but once we drilled it and started testing it, we saw that there was too much arsenic in it. This was before we ever started an operation. It's when we were doing the relocation. But we did, I mean, you can use the water for things like washing and so on, as long as you're not using it for consumption. So we did keep that running for a period of time with the caveat that don't drink this water. You can use it for washing your clothes and things like that, irrigation needs, but don't use it for drinking water. And then we have now provided a separate water source for the people.
So I guess there's a concern maybe that people were drinking it. Maybe that.
Right. You wouldn't want people to be drinking that water.
Defimen is supposed to make sure people don't drink contaminated water. They're the government agency responsible for testing. Oddly enough, they're also the agency for promoting mining in Honduras. But that's not the only strange thing about Defimen. The head of the agency, Robert Zelaya, is an architect. He knows very little about mining, but he surrounds himself with people who do. Ivan Guerrero is an engineering geologist.
Do you think that the Canadian mining, like Goldcorp, are causing pollution in Honduras? Currently now?
No tenemos nosotros una evidencia clara de que haya una contaminación.
And there's just this area here that talked about.
I showed Zelaya one of his own studies, one that showed dangerously high levels of cyanide in the water around Goldcorp's mine.
Cyanide, I believe.
Can I ask him? Venga.
¿Y qué sucedió en ese caso?
Turns out the test results were not valid. Honduras doesn't have the proper equipment to test for cyanide at Goldcorp's mine. Now they send water to an independent lab in Canada. To date, their studies indicate no contamination. People aren't convinced. Bishop Santos thinks all the mines are contaminating the country.
Allá están rociando el agua con cianuro encima del mineral para separar el oro del mineral. Y cuando caiga la lluvia del cielo, eso va a venir para acá también posteriormente. Pero podríamos...
para acá. Ellos dicen que no va a venir para acá.
Que no va a venir porque lo dicen ellos.
Bishop Santos says Honduras has been lied to for centuries. The mining industry promised big money. They promised they were safe. But when he looks around, all he sees are broken promises. There's no test result that will ever change his mind. He wants these gold diggers out of his country now.